Good morning, everyone. Boker Tov. In this week's Torah portion, we begin with Jacob leaving Israel to go to his uncle Laban's house in Haran, where he has to work 7 years for the hand of his beloved Rachel in marriage, only to be tricked by his father-in-law Laban to marry Leah, and then having to work an additional 7 years to marry Rachel. And then he works an additional 6 years, and after 20 years, he heads back home to Israel with his wives and his children. But when he leaves Israel to go to Haran, the verse says Jacob left Be'er Sheva in Israel and he went to Haran. And Rashi asks, why does it have to say he left Be'er Sheva and went to Haran? Just say he went to Haran. Obviously, to get to Haran, you have to leave Be'er Sheva. And Rashi says something beautiful, that the verse is emphasizing that when Jacob left, there was a void, there was a vacuum felt in Be'er Sheva, because when a righteous person leaves a city, everyone feels their absence, because that person is the beauty, the glory, the radiance of the city. However, at the end of the story, when he leaves Laban after 20 years, God has to come to him in a dream and say to him, Jacob, it's time to go back home. And Laban runs after him to harm him. And God has to come to Laban in a dream and say, don't lay a hand on Jacob, he is righteous. And finally, he reluctantly makes peace with his son-in-law Jacob. And he says, if not for God appearing to me in a dream, I would do harm to you. And Jacob says, what have I done to you? I've worked faithfully for you for 20 years. And Laban says, everything you have is mine. Your wealth is mine. Your wives are mine. Your children are mine. It's all mine. And here we have the first narcissist in the Torah. You see, Laban is a person of entitlement. First he says to Jacob, work for me 7 years if you want my daughter Rachel's hand in marriage. And then when he works faithfully for 7 years, he tricks him and gives him Leah and says, now you have to work another 7 years. He abuses him, he takes advantage of him, he manipulates him. And ultimately, even after everything that Jacob went through and achieved through his hard work, he says, no, everything is mine. It's my money, it's my gold, it's my cattle, it's my wives, my daughters, my children. You are not entitled to anything. And the first obvious lesson from the story is that when you're in a toxic relationship with a narcissist like Laban, you have to get out. You have to leave. That's what God tells Jacob. Pack up and go. And don't even discuss it with him. Leave in the middle of the night. And that's why Laban says, why did you flee? Why did you run? Why did you go? And the answer is because there's no talking to you. You're going to manipulate me to stay longer. And even Jacob needed God to tell him to go, because sometimes when the relationship is so toxic with a person, you're so confused, you don't even know that you're being abused. And God had to tell Jacob to leave. But there's another very powerful lesson here. And that is, when Jacob leaves Be'er Sheva, the Torah says there was a void in the city. Everyone felt it. But when he left Laban's house, Laban didn't feel that a righteous person left him. Why? Because when Jacob left, his mother and father and other righteous people felt the absence, because they themselves were righteous. But when he left Laban, his absence wasn't even felt, because he didn't appreciate who Jacob was. Sometimes we have righteous, great people living in our midst, and we unfortunately don't recognize how great they are. And therefore, if we don't feel and appreciate their goodness and greatness, unfortunately, we don't recognize the blessing that we have in our midst while we have it. And sometimes only when it's too late, after they leave, we say, oh, there's a void, there's a vacuum, there's an emptiness, how we miss them. And therefore the message is, don't wait till a person leaves. Appreciate them while you have them. Recognize the blessings you have. Your family members, your spouse, your children, your friends, your community members. Don't take any person for granted. And I feel this is so true. Since October 7th, we've lost so many heroes in Israel. And after they die, we hear these amazing stories. And we say, these tzaddikim, these righteous people like Jacob's were living in our midst. And we didn't recognize the depth of their greatness. And one such hero just passed away last week in Israel. His name is Yonah Betzalel Brief. He was wounded in May of 2023, 5 months before October 7th. He was a soldier in Duvdevan, 23 years old. And he was given a medical discharge. But he decided that he wanted to go back and continue defending his people, Israel, and the Jewish nation. And then on October 7th, Simchat Torah was one of the first soldiers to go down into the Gaza envelope, and he went into Kibbutz Kfar Aza with his commander and his best friend. And both his commander and his best friend were shot and killed. And he was shot in both of his legs, and he got 13 bullets. And with 13 bullets in him, he tried to save the lives of his friend and his commander. Unfortunately, they died, and he was taken to Sheba Hospital. And he was in the ICU for 417 days, fighting for his life with his 5 siblings, his mother and his father at his side, until he passed away last Tuesday at the age of 23. And at his funeral, everyone talked about how when they visited him in the hospital with both of his legs amputated above the knee, critically injured, he radiated light and love and blessings for the Jewish people and for Israel. And he cheered up everyone that came to visit him. And his mother talked about how he wanted to put on his tefillin every morning, and she would have to wind the straps through the different intravenous's and antibiotics tubes and IV picks in his arm. But that was his faith, that was his love, that was his determination, that was his sacrifice. And these were the most greatest heroes, the greatest tzaddikim of all time living in our midst. And now they're gone, they left us. And this should teach us to never underestimate the greatness of another human being. Never take it for granted. Don't be like Laban. Don't just be focused on yourself. Appreciate the righteousness. And don't wait till they leave to appreciate their light and their goodness. Appreciate it while they're still there. Have a wonderful day.